You awaken, or perhaps you never truly slept, to the smell of burnt oil and something earthy, almost metallic. The candle from last night has been replaced by a faint dawn glow spilling through the carved window. The poet is gone for the moment, but his ink bottle remains on the desk, half full and humming softly in the morning quiet. You reach toward it, feeling an almost magnetic pull, and your fingertips brush the rim. The air hums faintly, and suddenly, this bottle has lived many lives before it reached this desk. You blink, and the world shifts. You're standing in a courtyard surrounded by clay vats, smoke rising in blue-gray threads toward the desert sky. It's an inkmaker's workshop Persia again, but decades earlier. The master inkmaker hums tunelessly as he stirs a pot filled with soot, water, gum, Arabic, and a few secret ingredients he doesn't mention aloud. He says that ink, like love, only stays faithful if you stir it slowly. His apprentice nods, half believing, half wishing for breakfast. The inkmaker lifts a ladle of the black-blue mixture and holds it up to the light. "Not ready," he says. Still too restless, he adds a pinch of indigo powder, then something shimmering mica dust, maybe, or crushed beetle shells. Historians still argue whether Persian inkmakers truly used crushed gems, or if that was just a romantic myth. You watch as he smiles knowingly at the argument centuries away. "A little superstition makes the words last longer," he murmurs. When he finally pours the cooled ink into glass bottles, he whispers to each one, as though they might remember his voice. That's the first quirky fact of the morning. Some Persian craftsmen actually spoke to their wares, believing that kind words made them more durable. You like the thought of that every poem written in this ink would carry a blessing, a tiny secret voice. The scene fades, and you're back in the poet's room. He's returned, carrying a small plate of figs and bread, the kind of breakfast that tastes like patience. He notices your eyes on the bottle. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he says, picking it up and rolling it gently in his hands. They say the soot came from the smoke of sacred lamps, the kind burned in temples. That's why it glows faintly at night. You nod, though the glow feels a little like longing faint, persistent, and never fully still. He dips his pen and tests it on a scrap of parchment. Ink, he says, is memory in liquid form. It forgets nothing. That's why poets are careful what they confess. He grins at you. Of course, it also stains everything it touches, like love or pomegranate juice. You can't help but laugh softly. The poet is funnier than his reputation suggests. He passes you the pen. "Try," he insists. "Write your name." Slowly, you do, though the reed feels strange in your hand, whispering against the page. The ink flows unevenly, trembling at first, then steadying. "See," he says. It listens. It adjusts to your rhythm. The line looks fragile, but permanent, like something that doesn't want to fade. He explains that in Persian calligraphy, each curve and pause holds meaning. Even the spaces between words are intentional tiny silences that let the thought breathe. You realize that every letter is a meditation. If you hurry, he says, the ink punishes you. It blots your impatience. He leans back, stretching. He adds, there's a superstition that spilled ink means someone is thinking fondly of you. Maybe that's why my floor looks like a love letter. You glance down. The tiles are indeed dotted with black stains, like the footprints of thoughts that escaped. A faint breeze rustles the paper, carrying a whiff of smoke from the city beyond. Somewhere, bakers are lighting their morning ovens, and a camel groans in protest against the rising sun. The poet looks toward the sound, half smiling. Life outside moves fast. But here, he says, tapping his pen against the bottle, we let words move like honey. Historians still argue whether Persian poets truly used poetry as therapy or as political art. The poet shrugs off both theories. Maybe both, he says. But mostly, it's just talking to something that won't interrupt. He gazes at the bottle again. It always listens. He begins to write. You watch the ink gather at the pen's tip, trembling with anticipation, then glide across the paper in graceful loops. Each stroke feels alive, the page slowly filling with something too tender to read aloud. You imagine the words might spell out an old confession, a memory he refuses to forget. And as he writes, he murmurs almost to himself, "We are all just bottles, aren't we? Waiting to be filled, hoping not to dry out." You smile at the thought. It's melancholy but comforting, like an old song you don't quite understand but hum anyway. He sets down the pen, sighing. The ink remembers me better than anyone ever will. You sit in silence together for a long time, listening to the sound of cooling wax and distant footsteps. The morning light turns golden, and the ink bottle gleams like it's blushing under attention. You begin to realize that in this story, the romance isn't between two people, between creation and the creator, patience and paper, ink and the heart. And somehow, that feels enough. Thank you so much for joining me on this quiet morning. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the past. See you next time.